Welcome to Wellness Fixes the Pod, a by Maven media production, where we believe you deserve real education from real experts delivered in a way you can actually use. I'm Dr. Kelsy Vick, your board-certified orthopedic doctor of physical therapy, and this podcast was built for the girl who is done feeling overwhelmed and frustrated by conflicting health noise and is ready for something she can actually trust. Every week, we have honest, science-backed conversations about your health, your hormones, your brain, your body, and everything in between. No fluff, no fear-mongering, just the truth. Because understanding your body is the most powerful thing you can do for yourself. A table full of experts built for the curious girl who wants the truth. So welcome. Your seat is waiting for you. The same tub of white powder that your boyfriend or husband or brother kept in his gym bag is now pastel pink. It comes in sour strawberry, and it is being sold to us as women with words like tone, lean, and shred. But one of the core points of this whole episode is this: creatine monohydrate is a single specific molecule. It is the exact same compound, whether it is in a black tub with flames on it or in a pastel pink tub wrapped in a bow. The same tub of white powder that your boyfriend or husband or brother kept in his gym bag is now pastel pink. It comes in sour strawberry, and it is being sold to us as women with words like tone, lean, and shred. So today I want to do something a little different, a commentary episode, because here is my honest take. Women should absolutely consider creatine, but not for the reasons marketing is telling you. And definitely not because the packaging is pink and promises toning. Welcome back to Wellness Fixes the Pod. I'm your host, Dr. Kelsy Vick, a board-certified orthopedic doctor of physical therapy and a pelvic floor and women's health physical therapist. And this is something I dove into probably 6 months to a year ago when I started seeing all of these ads targeting me as their target demographic. As a young 20 or 30-year-old female obsessed with health, I, of course, started getting targeted with these creatine ads. And I started seeing creatine for women everywhere, and this pastel pink and pastel purple packaging and words like tone, lean, shred, built by women, for women. And it got me questioning and taking a step back as a mindful consumer on what are they actually selling? Are they selling me creatine monohydrate, the very well studied, very well researched for decades and decades compound? Or are they selling me the aspirations of a body composition that I want, of a supplement that is built specifically for women and not the typical gym bro supplement? And it further got me questioning, how much are they actually spending on research and development of their product versus marketing to women? So you guys can probably tell that I'm a little skeptical, but I reached out to a bunch of researchers to see their thoughts on creatine for women and the variations that creatine comes in, to have more of this collective mindset around how we should be approaching creatine as women. So creatine is one of the most studied supplements in the world. And for years, it was coded as a bro thing or a gym bro thing. It was a gym bag staple marketed almost entirely to men. In the last couple of years, it has been repackaged and rebranded for our delicate femininity as women, with softer colors, with aspirational words like tone and lean and sculpt, and various influencer campaigns. But one of the core points of this whole episode is this: creatine monohydrate is a single specific molecule. It is the exact same compound, whether it is in a black tub with flames on it or in a pastel pink tub wrapped in a bow. There is no separate reasoning to buy creatine for women over a typical creatine monohydrate. It is the same compound. So why are we seeing this drastic shift? Was it partly because the market for men was saturated, or this big push for women's health, where people started seeing women's health as a real opportunity to market this previously gym bro supplement? From my standpoint, I consume a lot of founders-based and how I built this based content. And a lot of the time, these founders are saying, I just found something and altered it slightly to make it better. And I feel like creatine has gone through this phase a little bit where people found it as a supplement, a well-studied supplement that was primarily targeting men. And they realized this opportunity to shift this same compound, but market it through more of a women's health lens and talking to some of the pain points that we have as women. It brings to the conversation the idea of the pink tax, and anything marketed or targeted or meant for women has this natural upcharge for it. Just like the wedding industry, a wedding two-tiered cake compared to a two-tiered birthday cake, there's going to be a cost difference. Creatine monohydrate straight powder marketed towards men might be a little bit cheaper than a creatine supplement built for women. One of the reasons we could be seeing so much more creatine for women is also because the creatine and female physiology specific research has become more mainstream over the last probably 3 to 5 years. So the entire mentality surrounding creatine has gone from this gym bro supplement to, okay, women benefit from this too. And we're starting to understand how women actually benefit from it and what might be different between women and men. And as a little preview, it's not that much. It's just about how much we can store. It's not that our bodies handle it any differently than men or require a different dosage or a different form of creatine. It's just we might not be able to store as much as men do. So before we dive super deep into this commentary, I want you to be a more mindful consumer. When you see a creatine product, look at it and think, am I drawn to this product because it is talking to some of my pain points of toning, of leaning, of shredding, of improving my body composition? Or does it seem like a solid product? And does it seem to come in a form that I'm more willing to take? And does the price justify what's actually in the product? Or is it for more of the marketing towards me as a woman? So I previewed it a little bit ago, but let's dive into what the female-specific research is saying about creatine. So they're finding that women's bodies do interact with creatine a little differently, just not in a way that requires a completely different product. The baseline difference is that women tend to have meaningfully lower total creatine stores than men, in part because we generally carry less muscle overall. So women just start from a lower baseline. However, they're finding it's not just the storage differences between men and women, but that women might actually have an increased benefit with creatine on things like their brain health, mood, and cognition, not just muscle. And that certain hormonal shifts across our menstrual cycle, pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, menopause may make it particularly relevant for us. The first exposure I got to this was actually with Dr. Katie's episode, maybe 2.5 years ago. She talked about female-specific research, and she mentioned creatine loading in our luteal phases as women, which can help give us some of the performance benefits that we often lack in the luteal phase. And ever since she mentioned that in her episode, I have been doing it consistently, and I have noticed a difference in my exercise performance and my ability to perform resistance training in my luteal phase and not feel quite as fatigued during my workouts in my luteal phase with that creatine loading. So I'll leave that link below if you're curious, but it has been a game changer for me. As someone who's pretty in tune with her body, I noticed a huge difference with how my body felt exercising when I did creatine load for 5 grams a day, 4 times a day for 5 days, so 20 grams a day for 5 days total. I felt significantly better in my luteal phase during those workouts compared to my luteal phase when I wasn't creatine loading and just doing the 5-gram doses that I normally do every day. So luteal phase to luteal phase comparison, not necessarily that I'm feeling absolutely stellar on my luteal phase creatine loading compared to my follicular phase, but it has made a huge difference. We also talked in that episode about feeling less puffy, and I'd say that has definitely applied as well, because in my luteal phase, I will typically get a little bit puffier feeling, and creatine loading has really helped me with some of those symptoms as well. So diving into a little bit more of the science, but reviews of creatine in women's health note that women store roughly 70 to 80% less endogenous creatine than men in absolute terms. So similar comparisons between both. And that female creatine metabolism tends to interact with estrogen, which is why researchers flag menstruation, menopause, and pregnancy where it might matter more. I keep referring back to a lot of these episodes that we've done before in the past, but I think the research on creatine and the people studying creatine and at the forefront of figuring out how creatine can help us as women, I think that research is super fascinating. We've done an episode with Dr. Stacy out of Australia, and she is studying creatine during pregnancy and working on figuring out how our bodies and the health of our babies can be impacted by creatine during pregnancy. So she chatted her research, now probably 2 years ago as well. So I'll leave that link below if you guys are interested in that conversation. But both Dr. Katie's episode and Dr. Stacy's episodes, highly, highly recommend because they are two of the leaders when it comes to researching the female body in general, but also creatine and the female body. So some of the menopause data is super fascinating. In postmenopausal women, creatine paired with resistance training has been associated with better preservation of bone at the hip, which the hip is one of the primary places they look at when diagnosing bone mineral density issues. In one study, these women lost only 1.2% of bone mineral density at the femoral neck compared to 4% in the placebo group. A 2025 randomized control trial in peri and postmenopausal women found creatine also improved reaction time and reduced the severity of mood swings. And there's just reasonably strong evidence overall that creatine can support mood. But despite our lower baseline, women reach similar muscle creatine saturation and get similar benefits at the same standard dose as men. So women do not need a higher dose, a lower dose, or a special formula. Creatine monohydrate does not know if you're a man or a woman. So if you've ever been on the fence about creatine, the female-specific research is a reason to consider it, especially for muscle, bone, mood, and brain, and especially heading into perimenopause. I guess I'm just going to link all of the episodes that I've done with any of the women who have mentioned this, but we also did an episode on menopause and what we can do in our 20s and 30s to help us prepare for menopause and help our bodies during menopause, with a physician who specializes in treating women during perimenopause and menopause. And she also recommends, independent from everyone else that I've talked to, creatine and resistance training for her patients. That is one of her pillars on if any woman comes to her searching for answers and assistance, that is one of her foundational things that she gives every single woman. So I'll leave that link below to that episode as well if you happen to be interested in learning more about menopause, perimenopause, and what we can do in our 20s and 30s to help our bodies during those times. Now, let's get into the format conversation because this is where I have the most concern and skepticism. If a gummy is the only way you can take creatine consistently, a real gummy is better than a perfect powder you never touch. But gummies come with a genuine chemistry problem that powder does not. Creatine is a little fragile. It degrades into an inactive byproduct called creatinine when it is exposed to moisture, heat, and acidity, which are basically the exact conditions of making and storing a gummy. Because of that fragility, I have a lot of questions on whether or not there are actually 5 grams of creatine in certain gummies on the market, and whether or not our bodies are actually getting the dosage that is labeled on the product. Independent testing has repeatedly flagged this too. One round of lab testing found that 86% of tested creatine gummy products failed to meet their labeled creatine amount, and a major manufacturer reported roughly a 46% failure rate in the gummies it tested, detecting the inactive creatinine in the ones that came up short. Testing labs have noted that gummies themselves are actually really hard to test too. So it does not mean that every gummy is empty. There are a few out there on the market that have been NSF tested for sport, which basically tests them for illegal compounds in them so that you can take them if you are competing professionally, but also to test whether or not what the company says is in them is actually in them. So if you want gummies, look for a brand that shows recent third-party testing or NSF certified for sport on the actual finished gummy, not just the raw powder. If they cannot show it, assume you may be getting less than what the label says and maybe zero at all with that inactive form of creatinine. Quick favor before we keep going. If this show has ever taught you something or made your day a little better, take 10 seconds to leave a review wherever you are listening. Apple, Spotify, anywhere. It genuinely helps other smart girls and mavens find us. And it's the easiest way to support a podcast you love for free. Okay, back to it. So let's look at a few of the common ones I see and compare them for what the product actually says it is, what you're getting, and if it's worth it from a financial standpoint. So starting with the Lemme brand by Kourtney Kardashian, their creatine gummies. I'm looking at their packaging right now, and Lemme Creatine Body Toning Gummies in pale purple. Again, it's very cute. It's speaking to one of my pain points, but is it the actual creatine I want to go for? if I'm just looking for creatine. So looking through their website, it does show that they are NSF certified for sport, which means they have had that third-party testing done, and it has been shown that the final product does have 5 grams of creatine in it. So fantastic. It is a gummy that you will be getting the 5 grams of creatine for per serving. So a serving size for the Lemme Creatine Body Toning Gummies is 4 gummies for 1 serving. So 4 gummies gets you 5 grams of creatine. It also comes in at 40 calories, 9 grams of total carbohydrates, and includes 4 grams of added sugar. Compared to creatine monohydrate powder, you're just getting the 5 grams of creatine. So there is a nutritional difference between the gummies and just the powder. The other thing that I question with Lemme Creatine Body Toning Gummies is their subscription service. So since the serving size is 4 gummies for 5 grams of creatine, it says each bottle comes with 15 servings, which is great. But if you sign up for their subscriptions, it says a 1 bottle supply delivered each month. So each month, you're only getting 1 bottle, which is 15 servings. We know, chatting with a bunch of the researchers that we've had on this podcast, that one of the primary pillars of creatine consumption is consistency. We're looking for saturation of those muscle stores. So consistency is really key. But if 1 bottle only has 15 servings of the 5-gram dosage of creatine, that means you'd have to only be taking 2 gummies or 2.5 grams of creatine at each sitting if you're going to make that 15 servings last for a whole month. Or you're going to take 5 grams of creatine for 15 days over the whole month, which we know one of the pillars of creatine consumption and effectiveness is the consistency with which you take it at. So that's where I start to question Lemme. Let's look at one of the next ones that's super popular called Arrae. First off, Arrae calls it their Tone Creatine Gummies. So right off the bat, again, speaking to a female pain point, and nowhere on their website do I see third-party tested or NSF certified for sports. So automatically it moves way low on my list, because if I'm going to be spending the money and taking creatine, I want to know that I'm actually getting creatine and not the inactive form of creatinine. And we found earlier that 1 round of lab testing found that around 86% of tested creatine gummy products failed to meet their labeled creatine amount. And I have no idea if Arrae was a part of that, but that's still a large percentage. And I really do want to know that if I'm taking a gummy, I am getting the creatine that it says I'm getting. So diving a little deeper into Arrae, it comes out to about $2.50 per serving, and each container or package of creatine tone gummies comes out to 22 servings per container, which again, if you're buying their subscription model, you're getting 1 package a month, which is 22 servings. So you'll have to divvy that up in whatever way makes sense to you to get that 30-day supply of creatine, which again, I'd rather know that I'm getting 5 grams of creatine per day for a full month, not just 22 servings. If we look a little deeper at their nutrition facts, we find 42 calories in a serving, 6 grams of total carbohydrates, and 4 grams of total sugars. So the next creatine gummy product we'll dive into is Create. And Create was actually flagged as a product to look into by 2 of the researchers that I reached out to, because they had noticed that it was used in a recent study looking at the effectiveness of creatine gummies and their use in elite beach volleyball athletes. So Create says it is third-party tested and NSF certified for sport, which means that the final gummy product has the amount of creatine that it says on the packaging. When we look at the nutrition facts, it comes out to 3 gummies is 1 serving, and each package contains 30 servings, which is a full month supply. So I'm already liking this option more. Calories comes out to 60 calories a serving, 8 grams of total carbohydrates, 5 grams of total sugars, including 2 grams of added sugars, and there is 4.5 grams of creatine monohydrate. So a little less than the recommended 5-gram dosage, but still, it seems like if you can only tolerate the gummy form of creatine monohydrate, this does seem like a good option. They even say on their website that a 1-month supply comes out to $1.93 a day, but if you sign up for their subscription, it comes out to $1.79 a day. So still more expensive than creatine monohydrate powder, but it does seem like a good, solid option if you do want to take gummy forms of creatine and feel like you can be more consistent with them. So I know there's probably tons more of options and happy to look into them for you guys, but Hopefully, this just gives you a little bit of an idea on what I'm looking for when I do some of these little light investigative journalisms on, is it the actual product or is it the marketing? And which one? Is it the actual product that is costing more, or is it the marketing behind it? And am I feeling drawn to a product because it's talking to some of my pain points, or is it because it's actually a better product? And in all of these instances, I'd say I'd still prefer my creatine monohydrate powder. It comes out to cents per day versus a few dollars or $1 and a couple cents. So it's much more price effective and I can be consistent with it. But I totally understand that people sometimes cannot handle the texture of creatine monohydrate powder. So sometimes in gummy form, the creatine itself is real, but you are often also paying for the added sugar, proprietary extras like absorption blends, and postbiotics that sound impressive but have thinner evidence, and a whole lot of feminine coded branding. None of that's a scandal. They lay it out for you. It just means you are paying a premium for packaging and add-ons around a cheap, very well-studied molecule. So I encourage you to read the label on your preferred creatine choice. And if you do enjoy creatine gummies, I definitely would, out of those three, recommend Create. I haven't gotten to study every creatine gummy on the market, but if it seems to be third-party tested and it actually makes sense with the way that they're selling it with 30 servings for a 1-month supply, that makes sense to me, then I'd definitely go with that option. But do a little deep dive, be a little bit more of a mindful consumer when you're looking at certain creatine products. I also wanted to flag the recent study where they actually used creatine gummies as part of their protocol, which from my understanding, that hasn't happened very often. So it's the effects of creatine monohydrate gummies on performance and body composition in female beach volleyball athletes. So their conclusions were that creatine monohydrate supplementation delivered in gummy form enhanced selected performance outcomes and helped maintain body composition in female beach volleyball athletes. So 32 female beach volleyball athletes completed the study and were included in the final analysis, with 17 assigned to the creatine gummy group and 15 to the control. And their conclusions were that this randomized control trial demonstrated that 10 weeks of creatine monohydrate supplementation in gummy form significantly improved counter movement jump performance and change of direction speed, so the two of the performance measures in female beach volleyball athletes. Supplementation was also associated with maintenance of body fat mass and percentage, whereas the control group exhibited increases over the intervention period. The creatine group demonstrated a small increase in total body water compared to the slight decrease in the control group, without meaningful changes in total body mass. There were no significant effects between the groups that were observed for lean body mass, skeletal muscle mass, total body mass, or reaction time. So just an interesting study that utilized creatine gummies as part of their protocols. Now, I want to land it with a few of the things that some of the researchers that I reached out to said. All of the researchers pretty much echoed the skepticism when it came to creatine gummies, knowing that creatine is very fragile and that the gummy manufacturing is probably very challenging to input creatine and then get creatine in the final gummy product. So one researcher says the dissociation of creatine into creatinine is an issue with many of the gummies. To date, one of the few brands that has been able to maintain and prove their claimed dose is Create. I think some others have since proven their dose, but I'm less familiar. Create is also one of the few that is third-party tested, certified for sports. So for this reason, it is the only gummy brand I currently recommend. This researcher also mentioned the beach volleyball study and said that she knows another study on their pharmacokinetic properties compared to the powder is currently in progress. So excited to hear about those results. And then the next researcher said, yes, the creatine gummy boom is well and truly on. I must say I remain reasonably skeptical because of the manufacturing conditions you pointed out, which have a high chance of degrading creatine monohydrate. As far as I'm aware, there are no published pharmacokinetic studies comparing the absorption and distribution of creatine delivered by gummies versus powders. You may have seen this study also inserted the volleyball study. They use gummies as their intervention. They don't report changes in blood or muscle creatine concentrations, but they did find significant performance benefits in female beach volleyball players. So both at the forefront of the research, as you can tell, both referencing the same exact study, but I thought it was very interesting to hear their takes. So I'm excited for that new pharmacokinetic study to come out to look into the effects of gummies compared to powders. But I hope you guys enjoyed this little creatine deep dive commentary and the effects of branding and marketing, but then also being a little bit more mindful when it comes to our consumption and purchasing of creatine especially as creatine for women has become more of a hot topic. I'll leave the link to all of those research articles below, all of the episodes that I mentioned below. Thank you to all of the researchers and clinicians that helped me out with just providing their take on this topic and helping provide a more full picture for me. But I hope you guys learned something, enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you guys again on the next episode of Wellness Big Sis the Pod. If you like the conversations we have here, then you will love the Smart Girl newspaper. It is my free weekly newsletter for the mavens, the most dynamic dinner party guests, the women whose curiosity does not stop at wellness, but expands into personal finance and investing, entrepreneurship and business, travel and culture, the consumer news worth knowing, and the articles and podcasts worth talking about. A new volume every week, and the link is in the show notes below.